When the Hudson Turned Gold. Chapter 5, Fault Lines. The crisis began quietly. It always did. A missed projection, a delayed acquisition, an email marked urgent at 2:17 a.m. Daniel was already awake. He had fallen asleep around midnight, later than usual, Emily's laughter still lingering in his mind, the memory of her lips dangerously distracting. Then his phone buzzed. By 3 a.m., he was in his apartment office, screens glowing blue in the dark. By 6 a.m., he knew the truth. One of their largest institutional clients was pulling out. Not partially, completely. Hundreds of millions in managed assets. The ripple effect would be immediate. Investors would panic. The board would demand answers. And Daniel would be expected to fix it. Control was slipping. He hated that feeling. Emily woke to a text. Daniel. Crazy morning. Meetings all day. Rain check tonight? She stared at it longer than she should have. It wasn't unreasonable. He had warned her about his work intensity. Still, disappointment bloomed quietly in her chest. Emily. Of course. Good luck today. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Daniel. Thank you. That was it. Professional. Distant. She told herself not to overthink it. But she knew that tone. She'd seen it before. Her father used that tone before he stopped coming home. Busy. Important. Later. Later never came. She shook the thought away. Daniel wasn't her father. And she wasn't 9 years old. At work, tension was palpable. Laura pulled Emily aside before noon. You might notice some intensity today, she said carefully. Daniel's firm is restructuring part of the campaign timeline. Restructuring? Emily repeated. Budgets may tighten. Her stomach dropped. Freelancers were always first to go. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in a glass conference room with 5 board members. Voices sharp. Controlled anger. Questions layered over accusations. You assured us the client was stable. I analyzed the data available. Well, the data was wrong. No, the data had been incomplete. There was a difference. But difference didn't matter when millions evaporated overnight. By late afternoon, Daniel's tie was loosened, jaw tight. He hadn't eaten, hadn't checked his phone, hadn't thought about the river. Or her. Until he passed the creative floor and saw Emily laughing softly with another designer. A man. Tall, easy smile, casual posture leaning slightly toward her. Something unfamiliar flickered in Daniel's chest. Irritation. Jealousy. He didn't like it. He especially didn't like that it distracted him. He stepped into the room. The air shifted immediately. Emily, he said evenly. She turned, surprise crossing her face. Hey, how's everything? The slight hesitation in her voice made him aware of his tone. Sharp. Too sharp. Busy, he replied. The other designer extended a hand. Marcus. Daniel shook it firmly. Hayes. A brief, silent assessment passed between them. Marcus smiled easily. Emily's concepts are impressive. I'm aware, Daniel replied. The possessiveness in his voice surprised even him. Emily noticed, and didn't entirely dislike it. But she also didn't like the tension underneath it. Can we talk? Daniel asked her quietly. She followed him into the hallway. You look exhausted, she said immediately. I'm fine. You're not. His jaw tightened. I don't have time for emotional evaluations today. The words landed harder than he intended. Her expression shifted, subtle, guarded. I wasn't evaluating you, she said softly. I was caring. He exhaled slowly. This was what he had feared. Feelings complicated discipline. I just need focus right now, he said. There's a lot at stake. And what am I? She asked before she could stop herself. Silence. The wrong silence. He didn't have a quick answer. Not because she didn't matter. But because she mattered more than he had planned. You're important, he said finally. But the pause had already done damage. At night, Daniel stayed at the office until almost midnight again. Emily walked home alone. The city felt colder, louder. She hated how quickly she had let him in. How easily one distracted. I'm busy, made her feel 12 again. You're not a child, she reminded herself. But wounds don't check age before reopening. 3 days passed like that. Short texts, no dinners, no river walks. Daniel buried himself in strategy and crisis containment. Emily buried herself in work, pouring emotion into design concepts that suddenly felt personal. Control, security, stability. She understood now why those words mattered so much to him. But she also understood something else. If he shut her out every time life got difficult, she would always come second. And she had promised herself she would never accept that again. On the fourth night, she stood outside his building. She hadn't planned to come. Her feet just brought her there. The lobby was sleek, quiet, controlled. Very Daniel. She texted him, "Emily, are you alive?" 5 minutes passed. Then, Daniel. Lobby. Her pulse quickened. He stepped out of the elevator looking tired, truly tired. Not just busy, human. She walked toward him slowly. "Hi," she said. He exhaled like he hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. "Hi." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she said gently, "You don't get to disappear when things get hard." His eyes lifted to hers. "I wasn't disappearing. You were retreating." He couldn't argue that. "I'm trying to protect everything I've built," he said quietly. "And I'm not part of that?" The vulnerability in her voice cut through him. "You are," he said immediately. "Then stop treating me like a liability." Silence. Heavy. Honest. He stepped closer. "I don't know how to need someone without feeling like I'm risking collapse." Her breath softened. "That's not weakness," she said. "That's being alive." For the first time all week, his shoulders dropped slightly. Just slightly. She reached for his hand. He let her. And that small gesture, simple, uncalculated, felt bigger than any financial recovery plan. The firm might survive, or it might not, but something more fragile was on the line now. Trust. And Daniel was slowly realizing. He feared losing her more than losing money. Chapter 6. What It Costs. The decision came on a gray Thursday morning. Daniel had known it was possible. He just hadn't expected it to feel personal. "Cost reduction across all external departments," the board chair said calmly. Immediate effect. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Marketing campaign suspended? For now." Translation. "Cut it." Translation. "Cut her." He kept his face neutral. Professional. Controlled. Inside, something cracked. Emily felt the shift before anyone said it out loud. Laura called her into the glass office just before lunch. "I hate this," Laura began, which was never a good sign. Emily already knew. "The client pulled funding for phase 2, Laura continued. "We're freezing freelance contracts." There it was. Simple. Clean. Devastating. "For how long?" Emily asked. "Indefinite." The word echoed louder than it should have. "I'm so sorry," Laura added sincerely. "This isn't about your work. You've been exceptional." Exceptional didn't pay rent. Emily nodded calmly. Because she had learned young how to accept bad news without breaking in public. "Thank you for the opportunity," she said. Professional. Composed. Only when she stepped into the elevator alone did her vision blur slightly. New York didn't care about potential. It cared about survival. Daniel stood in his office staring at the city skyline. He had fought for partial funding. He had argued that the campaign mattered long-term. But numbers won. They always did. He checked his phone. No messages from her. That somehow felt worse. He could call, explain, but explanation wouldn't fix it. And he hated offering words without solutions. Still, he left the building earlier than he had all week. Emily was sitting on the steps near the river when he found her. The Hudson stretched wide and silver under the cloudy sky. She didn't turn when he approached. "They told you," he said quietly. "Yes." The single word carried exhaustion. He sat beside her. Not too close. Not distant. "I argued against it," he added. "I know. You do?" She nodded slightly. "You don't look like someone who gives up easily." A faint, sad smile touched his lips. Silence settled between them. Wind off the water. City noise behind them. "I moved here with just enough savings to feel brave," she said after a moment. "Now I feel naive." "You're not naive. I tied my first real opportunity to the one client who could pull the plug overnight." "That's not your fault." "It doesn't matter whose fault it is," she replied softly. "It still happened." He wanted to fix it. Offer her something. A connection. A job. Money. But he knew she would hate that. Not because she didn't need help. Because she needed dignity. "You scared?" he asked. She laughed once, not humorously. Terrified. That word hit him harder than the board meeting had. Because fear in finance was abstract. Fear in her voice was real. He turned toward her fully. "You're not alone in this." She looked at him, searching. You don't get to disappear when it's inconvenient, she said gently. I'm not going anywhere. The certainty in his tone surprised even him. The next few days tested that promise. Emily sent out resumes, portfolio links, cold emails. Rejections came faster this time. Budget freezes everywhere. The market downturn was spreading. Meanwhile, Daniel's firm stabilized slightly, enough to survive, not enough to thrive. He was praised in meetings for damage control. He felt none of it. Because every time he looked at a spreadsheet, he thought about what that stabilization had cost her. One evening, she stood in his apartment kitchen, barefoot, scrolling through her phone. He watched her quietly. She didn't look defeated. She looked determined. There was a difference. I might have to pick up temporary work, she said. Retail, something. There's no shame in that. I know. Pause. But I didn't move here to survive. I moved here to build. He walked closer. You still will. You sound very sure. I am. She set her phone down. Why? He hesitated. Because he didn't believe in guarantees. Except now, he did. Because you don't run, he said. Even when you're scared. Her chest tightened slightly. And what about you? She asked softly. When things fall apart, do you run? He thought about the week he had emotionally retreated. The distance. The control. I'm trying not to, he admitted. That was new. Trying. Not controlling. Not calculating. Just trying. She stepped closer. You don't have to carry everything alone. I know. But knowing and doing were different. He reached for her. This time, not careful. Not measured. He kissed her with urgency, not out of fear of losing her, but out of realization. He had already chosen. Somewhere between crisis meetings and river confessions, he had chosen her. Later that night, lying beside her, staring at the ceiling, Daniel understood something uncomfortable. Money could rebuild a company. Discipline could rebuild reputation. But if he lost her trust, there would be no strategy to recover it. And for the first time in his carefully structured life, he was willing to risk something he couldn't quantify. But risk demands proof. And soon, Daniel would be offered a promotion, one that required relocating to Chicago. A promotion that would secure his career permanently, and threaten everything they were building. Chapter 7, The Offer. The promotion came on a Monday. Daniel knew it was coming before the official email arrived. Senior partner, Chicago office, full operational control, compensation nearly double, fast track to executive board. It was everything he had worked for. Everything he had built toward since he was 16 and watching his father pack boxes out of a glass office that no longer belonged to him. Control, security, immunity from collapse. He stared at the skyline from his Manhattan office. Chicago would be bigger responsibility. More authority. More protection from ever losing everything again. It was logical. It was efficient. It was perfect. Except Emily. She was sitting cross-legged on his living room floor that evening, laptop open, redesigning her portfolio website. She had taken a temporary job at a boutique in Soho to cover rent. Long shifts, lower pay, but she didn't complain. Daniel watched her quietly for a moment before speaking. There's something I need to tell you. She looked up immediately. That tone, not casual, not soft. What is it? He sat down across from her. I've been offered a promotion. Her face brightened instantly. That's amazing. It's in Chicago. The word landed differently. Her smile paused. Oh. Silence stretched. How long? She asked. Permanent. There it was. The first crack. She closed her laptop slowly. That was fast. It's because of how I handled the crisis. I'm proud of you, she said, and she meant it. But pride and fear can exist at the same time. When would you have to move? 2 months. 2 months. After everything they had just survived. After she had just started rebuilding. You're going to take it, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. He hesitated, and that hesitation told her more than any answer. It's the logical next step, he said carefully. And what am I? The question wasn't angry. It was vulnerable. He exhaled. You're not a variable in a career equation. It feels like I am. That's not fair, isn't it? She replied softly. You get offered security, stability, everything you've ever wanted, and I'm just supposed to fit into that somehow? He stood, running a hand through his hair. You think this is easy for me? I think you already decided. That stung, because part of him had. Before telling her, before discussing it, because that's how he survived, by deciding quickly and moving forward. She stood too. I just got knocked back to zero here, she continued. I'm fighting to build something in this city. And now you're asking me to start over somewhere else? I'm not asking you to follow me, he said. The words were technically kind. Emotionally devastating. You're not? She whispered. He stepped closer. I don't want to limit you. Daniel, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Sometimes not choosing is still choosing. Silence. Heavy. He had spent his life believing success required sacrifice. He just hadn't realized love might be the sacrifice demanded. The next few days were tense. Not explosive. Worse. Careful. Measured. Polite. They didn't fight loudly. They moved around each other cautiously. Like both were waiting to see who would bend first. One night, Emily stood by the window watching the Hudson glow gold under sunset light. When I moved here, she said quietly, I promised myself I wouldn't build my life around someone else's dream. He felt the words like a direct hit. I'm not asking you to. But you're not asking me to stay either. He didn't know how to answer that. Because if he asked her to stay, truly asked, he would have to admit something terrifying. That he needed her, and need had always felt like weakness. I don't want to lose you, he said finally. Then don't. It's not that simple. It could be, she replied. If you wanted it to be. He turned toward her. You're asking me to walk away from everything I've worked for. No, she said, tears finally threatening her composure. I'm asking if there's room for me in it. That was the real question. Not Chicago. Not money. Space. Was there space in his perfectly structured future for love that couldn't be predicted? That night, she didn't stay over. She needed space. He let her go, because he didn't know how to stop her without promising something he wasn't ready to define. Daniel stood alone in his apartment, the silence louder than market crashes. For the first time, he questioned his lifelong belief. What if control wasn't strength? What if choosing love was? Meanwhile, Emily walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, wind tangling her hair, tears drying before they could fully fall. She loved him. That was the terrifying part. Because loving someone who might always choose ambition felt like reliving her childhood. Watching someone leave for something more important. She refused to be that girl again. Even if walking away broke her. 2 weeks remained before Daniel had to give his final answer. 2 weeks to decide. Security, or uncertainty. Control, or love. And sometimes the hardest choice isn't between good and bad. It's between two futures you both want. Chapter 8. The Thing About Staying. The offer came on a Wednesday afternoon. Emily almost ignored the call. Unknown number. Manhattan area code. She was on her lunch break at the boutique, sitting in the storage room between stacked shoeboxes, scrolling through rejection emails with quiet determination. Her phone buzzed again. She answered. Emily Carter? Yes. This is Harper & Row Creative. We reviewed your portfolio submission last month. Her breath caught. Harper & Row was one of the most respected branding studios in New York. Selective, competitive, untouchable. We'd like to invite you in to discuss a full-time junior designer position. Full-time position. Her vision blurred slightly. Are you available tomorrow? Yes, she answered immediately, even though she was scheduled to work. She would figure it out. She always did. Daniel was reviewing Chicago relocation logistics when she texted him. Emily. Interview tomorrow. Harper & Row. He stared at the message. His chest tightened. Pride, fear, hope, all at once. Daniel. That's huge. 3 dots. Emily. Yeah. He read between the lines. This wasn't just a job interview. It was roots. In New York, the interview felt different from the others. Less rushed, more intentional. The creative director, James Harper himself, flipped through her portfolio slowly. You design with emotion, he said. I design with intention, she replied. He smiled faintly. Good answer. They talked for nearly an hour. Not just about skill, about vision, failure, resilience. When she left the building, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Not desperation, possibility. That night, she went to Daniel's apartment. The air between them was still fragile, but softer than before. How did it go? He asked immediately. I don't know, she said honestly. But it felt real. He studied her. She looked alive in a way he hadn't seen since before the contract freeze. And suddenly, Chicago felt like distance. Not opportunity. You'd stay, he said quietly. If I get it, yes. She met his eyes. Yes. The word wasn't hesitant, it was certain. He felt something shift inside him. All his life, he had chased positions that made him untouchable. But here she was, fighting for something that made her vulnerable. And she wasn't afraid. 2 days later, the email arrived. Offer letter attached. Emily read it twice, then 3 times. Full-time, competitive salary, growth track, New York. She laughed out loud in her apartment, alone, but not lonely. Then she called him. I got it. He closed his eyes briefly. I knew you would. Daniel, she said softly, this changes things. Yes. Silence. They both knew what she meant. She had something real here now. A future not dependent on him. Not flexible around his. Solid. Independent. He had 5 days left to accept Chicago. That evening, he walked along the Hudson alone. The water reflected gold as the sun lowered, the same gold from the night he first kissed her. He had always believed security came from control. From making the safest financial decision. Chicago was safety. Chicago was elevation. Chicago was guaranteed. But New York was risk. It was staying. It was choosing someone without knowing the outcome. For the first time in his life, Daniel asked himself a question he had avoided for years. If I achieve everything and lose her, what exactly did I win? The answer was uncomfortable, because the numbers didn't balance. The night before his deadline, Emily stood in his apartment kitchen again. This time not anxious, not fragile, grounded. You don't have to choose me, she said gently. He looked at her sharply. I'm serious, she continued. If Chicago is your dream, I won't resent you for taking it. He stepped closer. It was my dream, he corrected. And now? He searched her face, and saw something he had never calculated for. Home. I built my life trying to avoid collapse, he said quietly. But loving you doesn't feel like collapse. Her breath hitched slightly. It feels like building something, he continued. Something I don't control, something I choose. Tears welled in her eyes. Daniel, I turned down Chicago. Silence. She blinked. You what? I called this afternoon. Her hand flew to her mouth. You didn't tell me. I needed to be sure I wasn't doing it out of fear. And, I'm doing it because I want a life that includes you. Not one that replaces you. The words settled into the room like sunlight. She stepped forward, hands gripping his shirt. Are you sure? She whispered. Yes. For the right reasons? He cupped her face gently. For the first time in my life, he said softly, I'm choosing something that doesn't come with guarantees. Her voice broke. That's terrifying. I know. She kissed him. Not slow like the first time. Not urgent like the night of crisis. But steady, certain. The kind of kiss that feels like a decision made together. Later, standing by the window, the Hudson glowing gold again, Emily rested her head against his chest. You stayed, she murmured. He kissed her hair. I stayed. And for the first time, staying didn't feel like weakness. It felt like strength.